Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all right and that you've had a lovely weekend. So this week I've sent out a challenge to create some board game instructions, which I'd be very interested to see. I'm really looking forward to doing them. I made a board game when I think I was in year 5 or 6 at my primary school. And I remember everyone in my class was so excited to do it. So I thought I'd give you the opportunity to have a go. I thought you might enjoy it. And also to create some instructions. If you're not sure of how to do some instructions, there's so many examples online. And there's also, if you've got any board games at home, it says sort of how you would need to set out your instructions and the type of language that you would use in a set of instructions. But you've done loads of instructions in school anyway, so you'll be brilliant at it, I'm sure. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm going to read from page 139 today from Beetle Boy. So we are halfway through now, so we've made a lot of progress from the beginning. So I'm going to start reading and I'll do probably about 10 pages. Okay, follow along if you've got your book at home. Are you going to tell your uncle about this place? Bertolt asked. I don't know, Dorcas frowned. Not yet. I think you should, Bertolt said quietly. A loud bang sounded downstairs, and they looked at each other in alarm. Blood-curdling laughter echoed up the stairwell. What do you look like? Humphrey roared. Me? Pickering snapped. Take a look in the mirror and you'll see that satin highlights your talent for sweating like a warthog. Your tie looks like a monkey spewed bananas on it, Humphrey snorted. The cousins were back. Goosebumps popped up all over Dorcas's body. Time to get out of here, he whispered urgently. We don't want to get caught. He held his hand out to Baxter, who flew straight to it. They ran to the window. Virginia clambered onto the window ledge, leaning out and catching hold of the branch. She swung down and dropped to the ground. What if I can't reach? Bertolt clung to the window frame in fear. You'll be fine, Dorcas said. Just give yourself a good push off. Bertolt screwed up his courage, closed his eyes and flung himself off the window ledge with his arms thrown wide like a flying squirrel. He overshot the first branch, screaming as he hit the second and grabbing onto it for dear life. Virginia was up the tree in a shot, grabbing onto Bertolt and helping him down to the ground. Back to base camp, she pushed him. Quick! Hey! You made a noise like an air raid siren just now, so get on your knees and get under the table fast before we're seen. Bertolt crawled into the tunnel. A firefly appeared before him, lighting the way. Dorcas was shimmying down the tree, Baxter on his shoulder, when a window opened 1 floor down from Beetle Mountain. The cousins were in the kitchen. He froze. Pickering's head poked out. I definitely heard something. No, you didn't, came Humphrey's voice. Yes, I did. Pickering scanned the yard. There's someone out there. Dorcas held his breath. Don't look up. It was probably a fox. Humphrey's head popped out of the window beside Pickering's. Can't see anything except a yard full of rubbish. It's not rubbish, Pickering shouted, slamming the window shut. Dorcas dropped to the ground and crawled as fast as he could into Furniture Forest. Bertolt and Virginia were waiting for him just inside. Come on, let's get back to base camp, he said. Wait, where does that door go? Virginia pointed to a shabby wooden door on the other side of the tree, partly obscured by a stack of furniture. I don't know, Dorcas admitted, out of breath. I've never noticed it before. It could be a way into the boarded-up shop. Then we don't want to go through it. Bertolt looked at Dorcas, clearly hoping he'd agree. Do we? Because we'd be in their building and they're back home now. It's probably locked, said Dorcas. Might not be. Virginia cocked her head. If we are going to protect those beetles, we need to identify all possible escape routes out of the building, in case Lucretia Cutter shows up. Darkus nodded. OK, let's take a look. Before anyone could protest, he was dashing back across the yard, Baxter still on his shoulder. When he reached the door, he twisted the door handle and pulled. The swollen wood popped out of the door frame with a grunt. Darkus held his thumbs up and slipped inside. Bertolt groaned as Darkus disappeared. You stay here, Virginia said, wriggling past him. Be our lookout. OK, Bertolt said, looking relieved. If you see them coming, create a diversion so we can get out. Virginia peeked out from under the table. Wait, Bertolt blinked frantically. What type of diversion? Do something noisy, she pointed. Push that stack of chairs over. She launched herself after Darkus. Bertolt looked up at the firefly hovering above his head. I'm the lookout, he said. Virginia found herself standing on a black and white checked linoleum floor at the entrance to a dingy kitchenette. Dingy kitchenette. To her right was a neglected toilet. In the floor in front of it was a manhole cover. I wonder if that goes down to the sewers, she thought. Maybe the dung beetles. She stepped over the manhole cover into the kitchen. A Belfast sink sat below a dark window, the light blocked by furniture outside. Opposite was a built-in cupboard with a threadbare floral apron hanging from the hook on the door. Darkus, she called out in a whisper. Where are you? Here. His voice came from an archway to the left. Come and look at this. He was in the middle of the shop floor, surrounded by a mess of sewing machine parts. A powder blue sign, Fanny Fluter's Knitting and Stitching Emporium, lay beside a shattered display case that held a cobweb-covered ball of yellow wool. On the wall behind the till, in enormous dripping red letters, was the word pies. Scrawled underneath in spidery black marker pen were the words, make you fat. There was evidence of insect life everywhere. Chair legs had been eaten away until they looked like burnt matchsticks. Dark exoskeletons scurried in and out of nooks and crannies, glistening in the half-light as they trundled about their business. Darkus looked past Virginia. Where's Bertolt? Being our lookout. We don't want to get caught in here. Darkus nodded. If we could get that open, he pointed to the shop door, we'd have an escape route into the street. He went over to the door, pulled back the bolts and tried it, but it was locked. Don't suppose you can pick locks? She shook her head. Darkus rose up on tiptoe and ran his fingers along the top of the door frame. He stopped and grinned, pulling a key out of the dust and cobwebs. Dad keeps a spare key above the door for forgetful days, he said, slotting the dusty key into the lock and turning it. The lock opened. Yes! He whispered, yanking the door open an inch, stopping it before he hit the gold bell hanging from the ceiling. Virginia held up her hand to give him a high five. It took an awkward second before Darkus realised what she was doing and lifted his own hand to meet hers. Closing and locking the door, he pocketed the key and followed Virginia back into the kitchen. Opening the cupboard with the apron on the door, she whispered to him, Look at this. Inside was a staircase. Leaning their heads into the stairwell, they heard Pickering's and Humphrey's voices. I have Lucretia Cutter's card, and the beetles are mine, Humphrey shouted. They're in my room, therefore they belong to me. There was an almighty crash of crockery. It leads up to their kitchen, Virginia mouthed. You've forgotten something. Pickering's voice was dripping with acid. We can't get your door open, and unless I'm mistaken, there's a boy tied up and gagged in there. I wonder what the police would say if someone had told them about that. But you did that. Ah, but he's in your room, and he'll remember you wanting to bake him into a pie. I'm sure the police would be interested. That's murder, that is. Humphrey growled. All I'm suggesting is that we work together, Pickering said. You've tried to break the door down, but it won't budge, and my axe is in there, which means the only way in is through the window. So unless you want to continue sleeping on the hall floor, you're going to need my help getting in. Pickering sounded triumphant. If I get in and dispose of the boy, then we both do the deal with Lucretia Cutter. What do you say? There was a pause. Deal, Humphrey said reluctantly, as long as I get to make him into a pie. Virginia closed the cupboard door. Let's get out of here. Chapter 11 now. Where have you been? Uncle Max called down the stairs. I was beginning to worry. Dorcas beckoned Virginia and Bertolt into the flat. Nowhere much, he replied, climbing the stairs to the living room. Nowhere, eh? Uncle Max appeared in the doorway. That's often a very interesting place. He stopped, seeing Virginia and Bertolt. Oh, hello, I'm Dorcas's uncle, Professor Maximilian Cuttle. He held out his hand. Pleased to meet you. Bertolt Roberts. Bertolt shook Uncle Max's hand. Virginia Wallace. Virginia waved. We've come to help Dorcas with his homework because he's new and a bit behind. Dorcas shot Virginia a look. Well, that is nice, Uncle Max stepped back, smiling. Why did you say that? Dorcas said to Virginia under his breath as they filed past Uncle Max into the living room. You want to tell him what we've really been doing? Dorcas shook his head. Virginia gave him a knowing smile. Thought not. Come in. Oh, and I see Baxter's with you too. Dorcas, you didn't take the beetle to school. Of course not. Good. Uncle Max clapped his hands together. Well now, isn't this lovely having guests? He beamed. Hey, Dorcas? Dorcas smiled awkwardly and nodded. Virginia dropped to her knees in front of a ship made from balsa wood trapped inside a glass bottle. You've got some cool stuff, she said to Uncle Max. Why, thank you, Virginia. That's very kind of you. Uncle Max looked delighted. Most of these old things I've found on my travels. He waved at the assortment of curiosities scattered around the living room. It's a hodgepodge collection, but I like it. It reminds me where I've been. Bertolt sat down cross-legged on the floor beside a purple hookah pipe. Look, I'm the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. He pretended to suck on the pipe and blow out a smoke ring. Virginia laughed and Dorcas smiled at Uncle Max. But Uncle Max wasn't looking at him. He was frowning and edging his way towards Bertolt, peering down into his mass of white blonde curls. Don't move, lad, he said. There appears to be a rather large bug in your hair. Not again, Bertolt wailed, dropping the pipe. Why do they like my hair so much? Don't panic, Dorcas said, leaning forward. It's a firefly. A big one, Virginia added, with a belly like burning coal. A firefly, Bertolt looked up, trying to see. Oh, I don't mind them. They're beautiful. Shall I pick it out? Uncle Max asked. But there was no need. The firefly rose up out of Bertolt's hair, bathing his face in the golden light. Hesitantly, Bertolt held out his hand for the beetle to land. The firefly was long and thin. Its copper wing casings had gold edges and a white vertical stripe down the middle. It had a tiny face and stubby mandibles that looked like a moustache. You wouldn't know he's a firefly when you look down at him, because the light comes from his belly, Virginia said loftily. It's only when he's flying that you can see it. It's called bioluminescence. He's brilliant, Bertolt, Dorcas said happily. Now we've both got beetles. I've got a beetle, Bertolt's eyes grew big. How can you tell? Look at him, Dorcas said. See how his mouth is held open? He's trying to smile at you. Baxter looks at me like that sometimes. It's cute. I'm going to pause there for today. In the meantime, before I upload the next video, have a little think about what type of insect you would like to have. If you were Dorcas, Bertolt or Virginia, or even just yourselves, and you were to have a little insect follow you around, Which insect would you like? I think I would like to have a ladybird, but some of you might think, nope, I do not want any insect on my shoulder, thank you. So have a think about it.